And there are so many communities now where I've started to work that have not had libraries or archives or design sessions like this. And the way that we have kept those traditions alive are orally. So this is two kids with a piñata, but really this is about the chupacabra. And the way and it is an incredible, one of the most important things about how we have preserved our history and our heritage is intergenerational learning. So your grandparents would tell you a story that was intended to make you scared so you would behave, and it never leaves your mind. An incredible image bank of preserved heritage. And there was, in the 1960s and the beginning of the 70s, the Chicano political movement, which was called the movement, El Movimiento. And it produced a new generation of artists who re-envisioned and rethought their idea of what this country was. And it was neither Mexican nor United States. It was a fusion of both. The lesson is that when I went to go look at what the future of our design practice would be, I couldn't go to designers. I couldn't go to architectural schools to understand what it might be because they weren't listening. And it was in the communities, in the daily life patterns, in the stories that people told about ourselves that I found the route to exploration. So I decided that if I couldn't find it in proper building forms, I would look for it in informal phenomenon. This is a house that could be anywhere in South Texas, but because it's in the barrio of the west side of San Antonio, it's painted a pretty incredible shade of yellow. We started working with people who understood the politics and the cultural traditions of color, specifically a guy at the University of California, Davis, an educator who helped me understand the evolution of color and what it means to people and how it is tied to social standing. We started looking at decoration. This is this really beautiful fountain in Guanajuato, Mexico. And this is the middle of the barrio in San Antonio, Texas. But there is a whole tradition of trade that has been passed down from generation to generation. And in my community, very seldom have we had an opportunity to start from scratch. So many times what you will see is a layering of voice that gets added on to an existing building. So this is this really wonderful grill work from one of the missions on the south side of San Antonio. And this is this incredible house in the middle of the Mexican-American community that kind of has it all. It's got this wonderful rose window that mimics the rose window at Mission San Jose, and all of that ironwork and everything going on. And what that taught me was that there was a very formal kind of attitude that was Baroque in style, even if it was expressed from modest means. And that if I looked hard enough, I could find it even on the top of the chest of drawers in my grandmother's house. And monumental public art has always been a part of our expression. And so if I looked in places on buildings that other people had forgotten, that architects or architectural study might never lead you to, I found image banks of daily life and of history and heritage. And I also found expression and appropriation in the landscape of saying, this belongs to me. And I just love this particular piece of graffiti that says, imagine. And the interesting thing was that many times the people who were working in these, and I'll call them artistic forms, were people who actually had the opportunity to inform our work. And so we began through this process of beginning to conduct a series of focus groups with historians, with artists, with musicians, I came here, the very first time I walked into this building was to help begin to understand what was going on, because there was a Latino archives in this building, and I wanted to connect to the work that other people around the country were doing to kind of understand how they saw this expression in their own areas and in their own work. This looks like, this is a piece of graffiti from Rio Grande Valley. But it looked just like the 18th century cattle brands of the state of Texas. And I was interested in how young people were branding their landscape and saying, this belongs to us. And I fell in love with images that other people found tacky. that AutoZone on the left-hand side could be anywhere in the United States, but it was sitting right next to this combination tire shop and produce store. But the way that they set up this display of the tires and the pumpkins, I found incredibly beautiful. And you can't really see it in this slide, but that tire shop is painted the most incredible shade of lime green. And I found that many times in the place where I live, because of the climate, that the spaces around the buildings, the kind of informal spaces, were just as important as the institutional buildings themselves. And one of the spaces that I fell in love with that got me in trouble with a lot of my clients, because I kept on talking about it, are these ice houses. And they are places where people drink beer, but they're also places that have been kind of informal country clubs, and they're places that are about families. And they have in many ways, they really literally grew out of the phenomenon of having to have ice delivered to a central area in your neighborhood. And then that central place where you would go to pick up your ice became the place that you went to go pick up your eggs, and it became a meeting space where people would go on Fridays to cash their check, and I guess it's become 7-Eleven, but still in the state of Texas, this kind of informal place that fosters an interaction of people from different walks of life still exists, and I found really beautiful. Because to me it was a place that was both high and low, and it was a place that was intergenerational, and quite honestly interlingual, and that interaction was coming from many different perspectives in a couple of different languages. And so in 1994, I was commissioned to design a new facility in San Antonio that was called the Nedbank, the North American Development Bank, and it was going in a very sensitive place in San Antonio that had been the home of our World's Fair in 1968. And there was a whole group of people who really didn't want another building in the park, because it was, at that point it was referred to as Hemisphere Park. And I went away and sat in a room. It was the first building I ever worked on the design of. Now, I'd been a partner in the firm for over a decade, and this was the first time that I had decided as the president of the company to actually get involved in the design of a project and not just be the managing partner or the marketing partner in the firm. And together my partner and our team decided that the main cultural statement of this building was going to be this big hyperbolic paraboloid wall that was about 100 feet long and formed this incredible sculpture in the park. that would look like this, and it was, the building was primarily built out of concrete. But the thing I really loved about even though I spent a lot of time talking about the sculpture, the thing I really loved was that the lobby of the building had these kind of garage doors which felt to me like an ice house, and it was a courtyard building. So even though it was nestled amongst some historic houses that were being relocated in the park, it had this beautiful courtyard, so you could enter from different places, and the outdoor spaces that were connected to the building were just as important to me as the indoor spaces, and it had this wonderful kind of grassy court. And in the middle of the design process, right after we had gotten through schematic design for the project, the peso crashed. And I started getting really, just remember, because this has really been an exploration, and not all of these projects have been a success. The very first project that I actually decided to involve myself in as a non-architect in this very well-respected, now 70-year-old firm, is just being trashed in the newspaper. And this particular design critic, who quite honestly didn't know much more about architecture than I did at the time, started calling it the Leaning Tower of Pesos, which I can actually laugh about now. But it was, but the project was canceled, and the city decided that they weren't going to build the building in the park. And to his credit, my partner never lost faith in the idea. Now, this is this guy who is absolutely not Latino, and he's running alongside of me this 70-year-old practice, and the very first project just goes down the drain. And we had to stop for a minute and think about what we should do. And we decided that the exploration was important, that finding voice in communities was important. We decided that instead of declaring one kind of thing, that we would instead spend the next 10 years of our careers working in different communities to try and understand one thing about every project that expressed an idea. Because I was beginning to understand that where my practice was, to say it was one thing and declare it was absolutely not right. Brownsville is about 200 miles south, and it really is literally the tip of Texas. And there they celebrate themselves through the bravery and the courage of charros, Mexican cowboys. But about 150 miles from there in Laredo, this community celebrates themselves by dressing up as George and Martha Washington.